How are you today?
Really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Where are you at the moment?
I am in Margate in Tasmania.
And you finished your shows over there.
Just finished there yesterday, so it was wonderful. Great tour. We sold out the show yesterday, so it was a very, very special tour.
Oh, that's good. How cold is it down in Tasmania at the moment?
Damn cold. Yeah, pretty damn cold. It's hurting a little bit, but it's not too bad. They said it's actually pretty warm for this time of year, and the weather's been really good, knock on wood, for the last sort of 4 days. But yeah, it's been really cold at the night, in the night times and that sort of thing in the mornings.
Yeah, because you've been travelling around for the last 6 years to some of the warmest countries on the planet.
I have, and that's sort of where I usually like to dwell, but we had this big idea to do a huge East Coast tour of Australia, and, with the venues in Queensland and sort of Brisbane and stuff, we sort of put them probably a little bit too far to the end of the tour, because I've got to brave all this freezing cold weather for the first sort of 5 weeks of the tour, but yeah, it's not so bad.
Where do you spend most of your time? Because you've been in the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, Fiji, Canada and North America.
Yep.
But you were born in Fiji.
That's correct. Yeah, I sort of divide my time up quite evenly between Australia, America and Fiji these days. So I spend about sort of 2 to 3 months in each country, and then the other month sort of in the other, the Southeast Asians and the Caribbean and that sort of thing. So it's a bit of I've been touring to the States for many years now, and most of my family's in South Australia, so I have a really strong tie to SA. And then Fiji, where I was born, and, touring over there all the time, and a lot of good friends and sort of extended family over there. So, yeah, sort of a bit of everywhere. Home, for me, home is where the heart is, I think, at the moment, is sort of the theme of my life. A bit of travelling, so...
You said you spend a lot of time in Australia, but this is the first time you've actually toured Australia.
It is, this heavily. I've done WA, basically up till about mid-last year. I'd been living pretty solidly in America. So I had about 7 years with my home base being in Maryland in the USA, and then I'd come back to Australia to SA for about 6 weeks every year and tour around SA and a bit in Victoria and a bit in WA, but really this is the first time I've gone up this far and first time I've toured, really the whole of Australia.
And while you were in America in 2010, you got to perform with Bob Marley's Wailers.
I did. I got to open for them on their East Coast leg of their North American tour, which was just unbelievable experience. And yeah, I opened the show for those guys and spent a lot of time hanging out with them and learned a lot of cool stories about Bob Marley and the crazy scene. It was pretty much the same band that he recorded Exodus with, so it was a really amazing experience.
And it would probably take 5 or 10 minutes to list all the instruments you play, but there's some really interesting names in there. I've been looking some of them up online because I didn't have a clue what they were.
Yep.
Did you learn a lot of those on your travels overseas?
Yeah, pretty much. I love picking up, new instruments. I have a huge interest in sort of third world culture and these weird and wonderful instruments that sort of go along with it. So yeah, I'm constantly sort of adding new instruments to my show, and just recently I've hooked up with a few sort of custom guitar builders that have helped me put some of my musical instrument ideas to actually build the instruments. And there's a couple of these new ones, the wine box bass especially, and the dulcitar that was created with a guy in Port Lincoln in South Australia. And we're sort of talking like different ideas back and forth, and he sort of leads the way with the designs and the different ways we can go, and then I sort of play them and say, look, this is great, but we need to change this and this and this, and we just sort of go back and forth. So I've got so many instruments in the tour, it's ridiculous. It's a whole stage full of instruments, more instruments than most bands, I think, but yeah, I love it.
Well, your publicity said you're like in a cockpit surrounded by instruments on stage.
That's right, yep.
Do you ever get confused?
If I have more than 2 beers, possibly.
No big riders on your tour?
Yeah, no big riders on my tour. Yeah, it's a very high-energy show, a very demanding show physically and mentally. I have the time of my life every time I get on stage. But yeah, the concentration, pretty much both feet, both hands and mouth working 100% of the time, almost. So there's a few sections where I'll break it down to, instrumentals where I'm just using my, feet and hands, but most of the time the mouth is included with either the didgeridoo or the harmonica or the singing. So between the lot of them, it's a really full-on show. I know when I come off stage that, I know about it.
You've probably lost a few kilos every time you come off stage.
It keeps me fit, it definitely keeps me fit. Like I said, quite a physically demanding show, and I used to actually run and work out quite often, but I find now with the show being so full on that when I start doing extra exercise, it sort of starts fatiguing me more than I can, and I start sort of hurting. So I just, the show is my workout. You know, I do a lot of pretty hands-on with the load-ins and the load-outs and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of a workout on every day.
Well, you do have a 7-piece band that you perform with, but your show on Friday the 13th of July at the Palais in Hepburn Springs is a solo show, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. All the shows on this tour are solo. The band played Womadelaide Adelaide this year, and also in the Fiji Jazz and Blues Festival a month and a bit ago. But yeah, this is just solo. Just with the logistics of the large band and the financial aspects of it, it's just not feasible for me to tour with the whole band at the moment. But looking forward to having the whole band with me down the track.
And you're going to Fiji, New Zealand and Japan as part of this tour?
Yeah, well, I'll be in Fiji in November, and it's looking like Japan is going to be probably March, and New Zealand is all booked for February. So we've been locking dates in New Zealand. So it's kind of like my whole life is just an ongoing tour at the moment, to be honest. Yeah, it's sort of just never ending, and by the time that finishes in New Zealand and Japan, it'll be back to Australia, I'd say, to start the whole thing pretty much again. Just really focusing on Australia for the next sort of couple of years. Like I said, been out of town for a while and really excited to tour the show around this country for the first time.
And you've got an album out, Stories for the Soul?
Correct. We've got 2 albums out. Walked in the White was the first one that came out in 2008, 2009. And then Stories for the Soul was released last year. And a new album coming out later this year, which I'm flat out working on. I'm flying up to Sydney at every spare opportunity to continue working with that. I actually get in the studio around the show in Sydney on the 29th of July. I'm back in the studio for 10 days. Amongst all the crazy touring schedule, I'll be recording the album also.
So you spend a lot of time travelling and learning about cultures, and is it like that you had so much inspiration in you that you just had to release it now that you're working yourself so hard?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, with I love to travel. My whole show and my whole, my lyrics, my songs, probably 60, 70% inspired by the travel and the people that I meet along the way and the stories that I hear on the road. I find that it keeps me really grounded and really inspired, especially playing in places like Fiji and Bali and, and certain places in the Caribbean too, where it's, where you really have to take a step back because they don't run at the same kind of pace and timing that we do here in Australia or in America, So I love that aspect. But yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely excited about, playing the show at the moment and sharing it with everyone. So I just love to play, to be honest.
You said you've got another album coming out. Have you already written all the songs for that?
It's mostly written, yeah. I've been writing. It's actually the first time I'm working with a producer. I wrote, recorded, and produced my first 2 CDs completely. I had a few guest artists playing drums and percussion and trumpet and sax, but all the other instruments I pretty much played myself and multi-tracked the CD. But this time we're using a live band and a real producer, an amazing producer from Sydney who's very well known, and I'm very lucky to work with. And yeah, it's going to be something a bit special. I've written probably 80% of the CD is written, and there's a couple of tracks that I've sort of left. I'm recording it. Like I said, I've got the 10 days in the studio in Sydney in a couple of weeks, and then I've got my whole 7-piece band in the studio in October for 2 weeks to finish the CD off. So I've still got a bit of time up my sleeve to write the last couple of tracks.
And of all the instruments you play, do you have a favourite?
I do. I have a couple. My favourite of all is probably the double bass because it's the one I studied all my music on. I did my diploma and my degree in music on the acoustic bass or double bass, and got my first touring gig in America with that instrument. So I just love the massive wood. It's like, a huge tree, with strings on it basically. So I love that instrument, but unfortunately with the solo show I don't have that instrument with me because it's simply too big to fit in the van. But my favourite instrument on the road is probably the Weizenborn lap steel, the lap steel guitar, which is a beautiful instrument that doesn't have any frets. You play it with a steel bar in your left hand, and I use steel picks on my right hand, and because it doesn't have any frets to change the note, you change the note with your left hand, sliding the bar up and down the strings, and because of that it gives it a sort of almost a human voice-like quality to the tone, where you can sort of make it sing and howl, and it really gets people in. So that's probably my favourite instrument to play.
With everything you've done, what is your most precious memory of being a musician?
I think probably my special memory, playing with the Wailers was just incredible. As far as like gigs and locations go, that's probably the question I get asked the most, is where's your favourite place to play or your favourite place that you've been, with the best memories and best location and stuff. And I'd probably say Cambodia. There's a place in about 6 hours across Thai border in Cambodia called Sihanoukville. And Sihanoukville doesn't have any electricity. It's very hard to get to. Every morning there's a whole team of fellas that ride these Pee-wee 50 motorcycles with gigantic blocks of ice down this very steep sort of mountain to get to the town, and that keeps the beer cold all day, and they have, the gas cookers for all their beautiful food. Very laid back and just such a pristine, beautiful place. I did 3 shows there, and just some very, very special memories. The simplicity of life of the people there was really grounding for me and really special and inspired. There's a song on Stories for the Soul called Tiny Island, and that was inspired in that place, and it sort of compares this simple life of a lady who's selling fruit off of her head, a plate of fruit on her head, selling these bananas and stuff, and compared to a sort of a businessman sort of chained to his desk, sort of really focusing on, having these debts and paying off all the debts, and before he dies, sort of thing, and sort of comparing the 2 characters, so it's really interesting.
And was your parents musical? Do you know where this came from in you?
No, I don't know. My parents aren't musical. I just love music since I was, 4 or 5 years old. I just walked for a guitar or a keyboard or whatever I could find and loved it. So I've just loved music all my life. And, I mean, most people do, I think, love music, but I've just loved to play it and just devoted many years to practicing and performing.
And in your show, do you tell stories verbally, or is it all told through your songs?
It depends on the crowd, to be honest, but often I'll tell lots of stories, and then other times I won't. It really just depends on the crowd. If the crowd's got the vibe, like they're really into it and they want to hear that stuff, I can usually sort of feel that and I go with it. For instance, yesterday when I played this beautiful Sunday evening show at Margaret Winery here in Tasmania, it was just this amazing crowd that, it was a sold-out show, and they was just so into the show and listening, hanging on every word, every story, every lyric. So with that sort of crowd, I'll tell very big stories before the songs and tell the full story,
And your website is jayhoad.com.
Yeah, just straight up jayhoad.com. That's right, jayhoad.com.
And you've got links there to all your other sites, your Facebook and...
There's all sorts of stuff, so all those social media geeks can have a field day.
Thank you very much, and have a great show this week.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for the interview. That was lovely. It's nice to have an interview like that. Thank you. You're very easy to talk with.
Oh, so are you. Thank you. You're very giving.
Thank you too.
Bye.